Chapter 17. Advent of British in India. Learning objectives. The East India Company. The early wars. The revolt of 1857. Let's begin. Sister, why do you think the British came to India? Why didn't they stay in their own country? J. The British came to India in search of new lands. They wanted to trade goods from India to their own country. India is an ancient civilization which flourished and prospered even when other civilizations rose and fell. Right from the early medieval period, India had developed trade, commerce, education, art, literature, architecture, etc. India also had strong trade links with the Chinese, European, and even Arab traders. These trades were established through a land link. However, during the age of exploration in the 15th century, many expeditions were undertaken by seafarers in search of new lands and cultures explorers. It was then that Christopher Columbus discovered America by accident. He had set sail in search of India but reached South America. It was a Portuguese explorer, Vasco da Gama, who was the first European explorer to reach India through sea route. He discovered a new sea route through the Cape of Good Hope. He made a fortune by selling the spices in the European land that he took from India. Later, all the European countries started flocking towards India to start trading goods. The spices and cotton traded from India were valuable items in Europe. Hence, the Portuguese, British, French, and Dutch wanted to establish their trade links with India. Fact frame. Vasco da Gama sailed with more than 170 men and 4 ships, but he returned with only 55 men and 2 ships. All the other men got killed in the voyage. The British established the East India Company in India with the orders of the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth I, in 1600 CE. They had defeated all other European powers and got a full hold over the trade market of India. The company was first established in Surat and later expanded to other parts of India with the orders of the Mughal Emperor Jahangir. The East India Company grew very fast and wanted to get hold of the whole country. Aurangzeb was the last powerful ruler of India. After his death, the Mughal Empire started declining and the British used this situation for their benefit. The East India Company started expanding its military powers to gain control over different parts of India. The French too had set up a trading company in India at that time with centers at Chandranaga in Bengal and Pondicherry. This was not liked by the British. They fought and defeated the French too in Bengal, restricting their operations to Pondicherry. The victory over the French sealed the power that the British held in India. They were determined to take control of the entire country. The Nawabs and kings of the smaller kingdoms of India were continuously fighting with each other during those days. The British exploited this to their benefit. They helped one ruler against the others, and by employing the policy of divide and rule, they amassed power and wealth. Thus, they captured various kingdoms. The Battle of Plassey. The Battle of Plassey was fought between the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Daulah, and the British in the year 1757. The British wanted to bring Bengal under their control because it was one of the richest provinces of the country. They maintained their army in Bengal. The Nawab of Bengal resisted the creation of such a vast army by the British. He ordered the removal of the British army and all their fortifications. When the British denied this, he declared a war on them. The British under Robert Clive were victorious. Mir Jafar, one of the commander-generals of Nawab of Bengal, had betrayed him and allied with the British. Siraj-ud-Daulah was captured. This was the first step of the British towards the conquest of Bengal. The Battle of Busa. The Battle of Busa was fought between the new Nawab of Bengal, Mir Qasim, and the East India Company. In 1764, the East India Company had used its privileges to get a number of things from the Nawab of Bengal after the Battle of Plassey. However, they misused their privileges and increased their own profits. At last, Mir Qasim waged a war against the British with the support of Nawab of Awadh, Shuja-ud-Dawla, and the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II. But the British forces, led by Hector Munro, were victorious again. Hence Bengal came under the British control. The British declared themselves the masters of Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. Gradually, through various similar policies, subsidiary alliance, and the doctrine of lapse, they gained control over most of the Indian states and became the rulers of the Revolt of 1857. The Revolt of 1857 was the first battle of freedom that was fought against the British by Indians. Along with common masses, the rulers had also started feeling discontentment against the British. They wanted to fight against their tyrannical rule. This discontentment led to the Great Revolt of 1857. There were many social, economic, and religious reasons that led to this revolt. However, the main cause was the Sepoy Mutiny. The revolt of 1857 broke out at the military camp Meerut. The British had introduced new cartridges for their rifles called Enfield. Rumors spread that the bullets were wrapped in foils greased with cow and pig fat. The foils needed to be torn with teeth and then put in the rifle. Putting cow or pig fat in mouth was an attack on the religious sentiments of the Hindus and Muslims. The Indian soldiers refused to use these bullets, and on being pressurized, the soldiers revolted against the British and started a mutiny. That is why this revolt is also known as the Sepoy Mutiny. The Indian men in the British army were looked down upon by the British. They were paid less wages and were posted on very low positions. This sowed the seed of resentment in them. By the 19th century, most of the northern India was ready to raise the banner of protest against the British oppression. The Indian rulers like Nana Sahib, Tantia Top, Rani Lakshmi Bai and Begum Hasrat Mahal united under the last Mughal ruler Bahadur Shah Zafar as their leader and fought against the British. Result of the revolt: this revolt failed. A large number of Indian fighters were suppressed or killed by the British army. Bahadur Shah Zafar, who was the leader of this revolt, was captured and exiled to Rangoon, present-day Myanmar. His 2 sons were killed by the British. Hundreds were tied to the mouths of the cannons and blown up. Many others were hanged to death. This revolt was a turning point in the history of India. The rule of East India Company ended and was replaced by the rule of the British Crown. Queen Elizabeth was declared the Empress of India and viceroys were appointed to govern on the Crown's behalf. Although unsuccessful, the revolt sowed the seed of nationalism in the hearts and minds of Indians. This took its shape later in the form of the Indian freedom movement. Reasons for the failure of this revolt: lack of unity. There was no unity among the Indians who rebelled against the British. People were fighting for their individual gains and did not relate to the independence of India as a whole. Weak leadership of Bahadur Shah Zafar. He was not able to unite everyone in the revolt under one flag and failed to inspire them to fight for the freedom of the whole nation. Lack of discipline, military training and sophisticated weapons. The Indian rebels were not fully trained and also lacked the weapons. Therefore, they were easily crushed by the British. Recall: along with the other European countries, the British came to India as traders for higher financial gains. They took full control of the Indian trade market. The revolt of 1857 was the first revolt against the British. It paved way for the Indian freedom movement. There were social, economic, and religious reasons for the emergence of this revolt. The reasons for the failure of this revolt were British lack of unity, weak leadership, lack of discipline and training, and lack of sophisticated weapons.